Hello and happy Thursday. Welcome to another Lunch and Learn with Purse Strings. We are into April, and so all month we're talking about women in business. You can either be a business owner or have, a business position. And so we're so excited to have these different conversations. And today it's kind of making that the most of a leadership role. And so those who are new to Purse Strings, we're all about tips, tricks, pieces of advice on how to be financially fearless. And then when you're ready to either hire a coach, kind of to get to the next level, plan for retirement, get a will and trust, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. We call those our Purse Strings approved professionals, and Jenna Dillon is one of them. She is an executive coach. We're excited to have your expertise on today. But before we dive into our conversation, Jenna, could you give a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. But a brief overview of who I am. I'll start with the personal back of the card. I am a chipper, bubbly, determined, and hopefully playful individual. I like to be human first before a professional. But getting into the professional world, I am an executive coach. And what the heck does that mean? Because there's so many coaches out there. So I work with individual top performers, I should say, or high performers who are really looking to build a business, grow in their business that they're currently either a part of creating or they're leading in it. So like top executives, and when we get into larger companies that are mid-sized companies or above, it could even be mid-management leaders, but essentially helping people to either create a healthy work environment for themselves and the people around them and increase their revenue and results to make them successful, but also in a healthy, helpful way.
Awesome. Yeah, those are very important things, especially to create, a long time success and longevity, at any company. So you want to make sure it's all going really well. So I'm excited to have you on today and to have this conversation. If anyone's tuning in live and has any questions along the way, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Otherwise, if you're watching the replay, we can definitely come back to those as well. Okay. So diving in, to today, what does it take to be an executive woman or a female business owner?
Yeah, I think that, to start off, and this will be just skills that I've noticed in either people that I've really respected and admired who are women, but also clients I have had, is that there's a certain sort of tenacity, determination, and what else would I call it? Resilience that one develops in themselves. And I know that's more of a trait, but in terms of skill sets of how I would translate what it takes is, they really have to be competent, talented, skilled in whatever it is that they are, like what industry they're in and what roles that they have. And in some cases, I would even say most cases, because there are fewer and far women that continue to work their way up the ladder, that they have to be even more so than the people next to them to really stand out and have their seat at the table. They also, I've noticed, are very good at promoting and provoking advocacy, not just for themselves, but people around them, men and women alike. So they've been very good at that I've seen in terms of skill set. And they're great at their ability to be resourceful. What do I mean by that? Like they're able to recognize the resources around them, be it tangible, people, the intangible resources that they develop in themselves or see in other people. And they know how to use that and play to that to move them, their team, the organization forward. So their ability to be resourceful. And finally, the last thing is there is emotional intelligence involved because they have to appeal to their audiences. And I say there's several different types of audiences. And it's not necessarily like they're performing for a show per se audience, but just the different types of people that they are around on a regular basis, whether it's, investors one day or in one meeting, and then their team internally the next hour of the day. And then the next hour is talking to customers and clients. And then the next hour is talking to a different team that they're not usually with, that they're like, there's so many different types of audiences. And so not only do they know and are good at figuring out how to appeal to them, but there's something that's dynamic about them, why people look up to them and see them as a leader. So there's this dynamic trait that goes with it.
Definitely. I love all of those. I mean, some of the resilience, especially if you're in a male dominated industry, you have a lot to kind of push against just, as it is. And then the resourcefulness. I mean, I know as a business owner, you always got to be very resourceful of what you have, what you can get, what you're working with. But then since you are wearing 1,000 different hats, you're having different conversations with all these different people. And I know that's, an executive position as well, you're having all these different conversations. So you do have to be dynamic and flexible and be able to have those conversations with everyone, which can be hard to do. It's definitely a skill that, it's always improving for sure. I think all of these skills, really improve as you grow and as you practice them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I know these are some of the traits that you said kind of make them, it kind of takes to be a business owner or an executive. Are there any other ones that you see really make them successful, or where people kind of struggle more, where you could see, more room for improvement?
Yeah, I think, ones that I'll start off with the ones that I've noticed have made them successful, or what I've perceived has made them successful. Because let's just be clear, it's my perception, right?
Of course.
Their perception. But outside of the things that I've mentioned, there is I would say, a equal trait to being self-aware of not just who they are, their strengths, the things that they're not good at, but also knowing who they are, being confident with who they are. So those things are equal, that I experience and perceive. And then another trait that I would say is, and I don't hear this word being used very often, I'm going to say prudent. So what is prudent?
Yeah.
Right? I even, there's actually a couple from what I've learned. There's a couple different definitions that are similar to prudent. And so what I mean by prudent is they have a certain acumen to having this wise and clever discernment in either looking at managing practical affairs, whatever those are currently, but also they're able to have foresight, meaning they're able to look at what's going on right now and how would that impact the future. So whether it's how do we prevent challenges that we may foresee coming up, how do we consider how to plan and prepare for our future, they have that ability to do that very well. So prudent is something that I'll mention.
That's a hard one.
Yeah, it can be a hard one. It can be, it's something that I don't hear very often. That are not as commonly traits, you gotta be resilient. I feel like we hear that a lot, well, yes, duh.
Yeah, of course.
But I think to just bring some light or perspective, I try to think about what isn't being talked about that I think really revealing and helpful. And that's something that has stood out. And then of course, I kind of lump together courage and bravery. It goes hand in hand with that advocacy that I mentioned and confidence that I mentioned. Of course that's there. And the word vulnerability, semantically has kind of evolved over the last few decades. People will once, and some even I think still do, look at that word as being emotionally weak. If you're vulnerable, you're putting yourself in potential for a threat, and in some way that word can be used that way. But I think in what is becoming more of an evolved definition of vulnerability, thanks to Brene Brown and many other people who have been pioneer researchers, psychologists, sociologists, etc., is vulnerability is actually showing something of strength and courage and bravery to be willing to be themselves and voice that. And I think more and more now that's important for women to model. I'm not just talking about Me Too movement. I'm talking about what makes us women from the course of history and culturally that we have, in whether they're innate or trained ways of behaving, acting, perceiving the world that actually are to our benefit to help men and women together, and how we can be comfortable bringing that into a leadership role where we can not just be true to ourselves, but actually be for the better of the people that we're with. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation because a lot of these different things that you're bringing up, kind of being the self-aware, being, vulnerable, things like that, they're very feminine traits to me. And so I don't know sometimes if bringing them into the workforce, it's just bringing and kind of adjusting that yin yang that, it used to be so male dominated. Now it's both. Or if it's something that's really carrying between men and women now in the workforce. But like, I think, if you talk to someone and, I kind of explain what I'm going through. And then when you explain what you're going through, I feel a lot more comfortable that you were vulnerable with me. And now we're kind of even versus you being like elite, and so I can see how vulnerable and these things are really good. But to me, so many of these seem very just like female traits, not good or bad, but they seem very feminine to me.
Yeah. I'm finding more and more, I'm hearing more and more people talk about a feminine energy and a masculine energy, or like feminine type behavior versus masculine type behavior. And I'm not even like saying like every person has both and a different ratio of both. But yes, I've been hearing that talked about more and more, which is, I think, really helpful and gives perspectives that, to each person in terms of how they can, in person, not just a woman, right? How each person can consider who they are and their true self, right? And even the fun thing about that I'll even say in their true self, like that of course is relative to how they perceive themselves, and take in the other dimension that we are elusive, or we are always evolving, ever evolving. And so that to me is exciting, and something to even keep considering is staying curious and humble to who you are, who the people are around you, and seeing how we can continue to learn together.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
I did. There was something that I know you mentioned earlier, and I've kind of gone on a rabbit trail around the things that I've seen are strengths, but things that I'm seeing in really powerful women in leadership that are struggles, or that they are inhibited by, either by themselves or just the situations that they're in, not assuming we point fingers to one specific thing, but is, I often will find, and this concept first makes sense to what I'm about to say, is women, as they climb the ladder, there are less and less of them. And though that's starting to change, the way in which women that have climbed the ladder or still are climbing and on their way there, if you will, they are and have figured out things that work for them, whether it's the situations they're in with the people around them, whether it's the industry. And so they've started to, if not have learned, how to behave and act and like the norms, right? And so what can happen now is not that all women that I coach are like this, but there are several women who they are very, and listen, we can, as women, we can be like this as children too. So it's not that they have become this very strong, assertive, like a straight shooter.
Yeah.
Right. Very strong woman. There's nothing wrong with being a strong woman. Like, I admire strong women, and they then can get feedback that they're, too harsh.
Yeah.
Or, and so it's not that it's bad, but it's how can they learn either how to have both their, we mentioned earlier, like feminine and masculine qualities come to the surface, that strong straight shooter, almost like it can appear like non-emotional. That's actually considered more of a masculine energy.
Right.
It's not right or wrong. That's just how people will like frame this. And bringing in that more nurturing or compassionate or emotionally available. You're not someone's therapist, but you are able to speak from a place of caring for somebody, and there's some softness to it, right? That's more the feminine. So I've experienced several women who are learning how to bring both together, and they will have their buttons pushed, that they don't feel like that's going to go well, because if they were to do that, then the people around them, men or women who are lower than them, will perceive them X kind of way. Like, so it can really have different inhibitions, doubts, fears come up when though they're getting feedback in this one regard, it challenges their beliefs or concerns or doubts in another if they were to change the way that they behave and act. And what also goes with this that I see, and this also makes sense why a human would do this and a woman would do this, is because if they've experienced, there are few women where they are, they then will perceive other women close to them in rank or next to them in rank or above them in rank as competition. And there's a little bit of a catty behavior because they're threatened by each other. And in fact, like that can inhibit both of their growth. Like, so how do you address another woman who's growing with you next to, or you're ahead of, or they're ahead of you, in a way that you're promoting and provoking advocacy, right? Like, so those are two things that I see as of the last couple of years that are struggles.
I can definitely see kind of climbing to the top and kind of conforming, changing your ways a little bit just as you keep growing to get up there, because that's kind of like their qualifications, but kind of losing your personal, more authentic self of maybe being more nurturing or things like that. But I also think for a while, we've only been told, there's one seat at the table for a woman. And so we have to fight for that seat versus, hey, there can be more than one chair here. Let's bring a couple of chairs and all be at the top together. And I think that's just kind of a dynamic switch as we do have more women come to the top. There aren't limited seats. We can bring in more chairs. It doesn't have to be just one woman, one person of color, and then that's it. We can all bring up there together.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think even if we were told, we're going to go off the concept you said, if we were told there's one seat at the table, then we often will be like, oh, okay, well, who's going to get that seat? And we'll kind of chew on the bait or take the bait of one seat at the table versus, well, wait a minute. Like, what if we got the people who are advocating for women, not just women, but men who are advocating for women, and getting their perspective to be able to say, well, why is there just one seat? Can we not have more than one seat here? What would be the benefits to that? Oh, I don't see Maggie anymore. Maybe she had technology trouble and we'll be back on here. Hold, please. Let's see. Actually, once if it is in fact just me, which I think it is, just so there isn't dead time here. One thing that I have been experiencing quite a bit with my clients in the corporate world, even with some of my friends that I've had conversations with and colleagues, and in various ages, like from their 20s with people that I talk to their 70s, right, is being able to look at, as women, we might have or are often trained to be caretakers, and the expectations, be it expectations that were put on us from society norms or self-imposed expectations that can come with caretaking or being able to balance a work life, anything, right? Especially if we're the mother of children, how can we do it all is kind of this expectation. And we are given expectations of juggling quite a bit of balls in the air. And so one thing that I would advocate as advice, and for women who are experiencing any kind of juggling, which I think anyone can be right now, is how can you value yourself so much, know what you're bringing to the table, or knowing that you can value yourself to take care of yourself, and actually be selective to not bite off more than you can chew. So in other words, going with the ball juggling metaphor, it's actually valuable to you and everybody else, and it's selfless to be selective of how many balls you're actually picking to juggle, how you are spending your time, who you are spending your time with, what you are choosing deliberately to put your energy towards. So I would say to be really, really tuned into that and consider asking yourself that, right? Um, I would say the second thing that I would consider, have you consider for yourself as women is, even in order to do what I just said, but outside of that as well, is slow down to really listen to your gut and intuition. We all have an intuition. Women tend to, more often than men, we tend to be able to listen to our intuition and our gut a little bit easier than men. And we also, like genetically, have the capacity to have a larger emotional vocabulary. And so, humans make emotional decisions and then use their intellect to justify it. So emotions are really key. And for you to make decisions for yourself out of emotions, to be as true as you can to yourself, is to listen to your gut and intuition first. It doesn't mean that it's going to be right, but it means to listen to it, and slow down to be in tune with what is going on for you. Slowing down, I will emphasize again, helps with that. So I would say that, like, one thing I personally have done, to slow down and listen to my gut is, I'll actually give you context, is I picked the word joy this year as my word for my intention. I pick up an intention, a word every year. I actually just posted about it in my social media platforms, and it'll be a theme this month around joy. And oh, maybe Maggie's coming back on. Perhaps. Okay, there we go.
I'm back. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. To give you context, Maggie, I was talking about, just going off of what we were talking about, like some of the things that I would give as advice,
Yeah.
to people or to women right now, as per like what I'm seeing and per our conversation. I mentioned like to not bite off too much, like too much that you can't chew it all, right? Like, so being really intentional and selective
Yeah.
about, who you're spending your time with, what you're spending your time on and energy on, because we only have so much of it.
Yeah.
And then to slow down and listen to your gut, and how important that is for any human, but in particular women, because of even like the expectation of wanting to put a lot of things on our plate and caretake, for instance, right? So like I was actually just talking about how one practice I do for myself is for me to slow down and practice a intention of joy, which is my word for the year, joy, is I have to be very deliberate. Like, I have a coach myself. I've always had a coach, before I even started coaching. And it's humbling because everyone has their own stuff to work on,
Yeah.
right? And for me, like, in order for me to really develop a new attitude and state of mind that's going to help me, I have to be deliberate. And so one thing I've done around joy is I have an Asana to-do list. It's like a project management platform. And I have a reoccurring task that repeats every day that I get to check off when I've read through the description. And then in that description, the title of the task is temperature check, right?
Okay.
The way to get a temperature check on me, and I read these thoughts or beliefs that I've written down that encompass a mindset around joy.
Yeah.
And so I'll actually read some of it to you because I can whip it up here pretty quickly. So some of it is asking myself the questions: is there room for me to play here? How can I play? And then there's also, I decide, I choose my pace, I choose my play, and accept and trust what isn't clear will be revealed. So that's just something I do for me, that because it's visually there for me to see every day and to read, it's something simple but helpful, like where I've put some thought into, what would that state of mind or attitude
Mhm.
entail for me to work on joy, right?
Yeah.
So that's just something as an
I
example
love
that I
that. I love that. And yeah, I wanted to ask, I know you said you kind of do this in your daily routine. Are there any other like tips, tricks, things you have in place in your daily routine to kind of either help in these different areas or, be better at what you do or, different things like that that we can make habits?
yeah, I think so I can get really micro and I can get macro. So I'm going to go macro
All
just so I
right.
can really appeal to more people. So I would say know your lane. And what I mean by that is anytime you're starting an endeavor, whether it's a project with a team, whether it's, okay, you're clear on your goals and you're going to start taking action and you have your strategy, or whether it's you're literally starting a business, is understand like what I'd be able to understand and know what do you know, and what do you don't know.
Hmm.
Okay. And with what you don't know, and also accepting the fact that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's a huge
Okay.
one.
Okay. Those two things, how are you going to have yourself and your team or your organization or your business be supported with those two things? Who can fill that for you that
Yeah.
is better than you in whatever way that is more knowledgeable, and that, like, so in order for you to identify that and to seek and find that, you have to be willing to overtly and confidently say, I don't know X, Y, and Z. And
Hmm.
that, for not just women but people, I can even say, especially women, as they're working their way up the ladder, if you will, that can be very counterintuitive for someone to do and be willing to
Yeah.
do, because they're like, well, if I come clean about me not knowing something, that's going to make me look like an imbecile, or it's going to make
Right.
me look weak, or it's going to make me look like I'm not competent. And even though that makes sense that someone might have that um, thought, it's actually counterintuitive because people will respect you more. People will
Hmm.
appreciate you being more human, and will see that you are not just humble, but you are comfortable and confident being humble, and
Right.
that you are, again, promoting and provoking advocacy where people can see how to work with you in a way
Yeah.
that they will want to and want to continue working with you. I've had my fair share of like mistakes, thus lessons to learn how to do that. And I continue to have opportunities in front of me where it challenges me to do that. So that would be something for sure to consider.
I mean, no one's an expert in everything. And so we have to understand, where our expertise kind of lie. And then
Yeah.
kind of, like you said, gives it opportunity for someone else to kind of step up and say, that is my expertise. And I think especially being a business owner, there's a line where you have to draw where I'm not an expert and I have no time to become an expert. So
Yeah.
I'm not, there's a point where it's like I can learn some things and do some things and pretend I know enough
Mhm.
to get me from point A to point B. But there's a
Yeah.
point where it's like, if you want it done well, that's someone's full-time job. So you need to
Mhm.
bring them in and bring that expertise because you can't do it all. We don't do it all. But we think a lot of times as women, we have to, which
Yeah.
is we don't.
Yeah. If I could add one more thing, actually, because this is something that I've been reminded by, like in the last few months, but I also
Yeah.
have seen other women experience this. Um, and I don't find many people in the professional development and personal development are talking about this. So it's one of the reasons why I want to kind of be like, okay, let me give it to you straight and be frank about what people aren't talking about.
Yeah, please.
And I'm sure there are some, but I just don't find many. Is there is something called growing pains with growth, and I find often when people, women included, experience some sort of adversity or discomfort or naysayers or putting them down and setting higher expectations or treating them a certain way of misconduct, like, and that often people will perceive that as oh, I'm going back 2 steps
Mm-hmm.
in order to move forward. When in fact, ask yourself, is this a growing pain? Because it's part of what comes with success. Um, and I think acknowledging, like, it's a law, people.
Yeah.
There, anytime we grow, even physically, like when we get taller,
They're
there
growing
can
pains.
be growing pains, right? And so I think if you can consider accepting that that will come with the territory, and then when it happens and you're facing discomfort, adversity, whatever that is, um, you can relate to it a little bit
Yeah.
better and in a little bit more in a helpful way, where it's like, oh, here, this might be a growing pain. Okay, that's what that is. It's not, oh, I'm sucking right now, or
Yeah.
I'm, could actually be the opposite because of that. And so because you're doing well, people are now threatened by you, or because you are blah 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 blah, like whatever it is. And so yeah, that would be something for sure. What also comes with the growing pains, and this is something, I mean, I'll be quite vulnerable myself, that I've experienced at different points in my life and in my career as a coach, is whether you deem success as growing financially, or building your business with a certain amount of employees growing, or it's even for me, like I tend to look at my success as how much can I grow in understanding myself, doing the work on myself, so I can then better not bring my stuff up and serve my clients more, right? And anytime that somebody is growing, I'll use the example of how I see success in growing in myself, is that also means the people that I deeply care about may not dive into that self-awareness for themselves. And so what you learn about yourself, and this doesn't have to be just introspection, it can relate to anything that you're learning and growing in, and compared to the people around you that are like your people, right? Whether they're your inner circle at work, inner circle at home, whatever it is, the moment you keep growing, that may mean the people that are in your circle or inner circles may not relate to you in that way. And that's okay. They're not less than or worse because of it. But the growing pain that can happen, and that I have had the thought of several times, is it can feel lonely. And that is a normal feeling. And it can also mean, oh, like, where can I continue to build relationships with people that can relate to me and I can relate to them? And it actually feeds, it's reciprocal. It feeds both parties. Doesn't mean you necessarily are like naysaying to the other people, but just knowing that as we are evolving and growing, there can be a change in how our relationships evolve with people. So I do want to stress that, because I do find most leaders, not any gender, feel lonely, and people don't talk about that. and it's important to address it. Yeah.
It's hard because it's like, I wanted all this success and now I'm here and I kind of feel alone. So is it what I wanted, But like you said, I feel like you always need to go through these growing pains to kind of level up. You can't be at this level without scars. I mean, that's how it works. Everyone at this level has certain things you have to get through. And so there are those growing pains, there are these things. But I'm glad you brought up that it does get lonely, and, we grow and with people and outgrow some people. And it just sometimes is in different areas of life too, different things we might talk about or not talk about with them, just as the way we're growing and they're growing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last question I had for you today is, more and more women every day are opening businesses. So what advice, would you give them to be successful and feel whole as you kind of manage this, high pressure at work and kind of, transition, let's say if you have a family as well?
Yeah. I'll actually give this exercise should anyone want to do it.
Awesome.
Think about the people that you deeply admire and respect. And I would even encourage, like, personally, like in your personal life, they don't have to be a professional anyone, and they can be a man, a woman, however they identify gender wise, and then also professionally.
Mm-hmm.
Who are they? You can get clear on their names, but more so, what about them? Why do you admire them? What is it about them that you deeply admire and respect?
Mm-hmm.
And what those end up becoming are what you see in them that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you wouldn't see that if you didn't have that. And so that says something about who you actually are, and how can you use those things or develop those things, or perhaps it's even you have developed it, but it's about being comfortable to emulate and model those things, right? One of my heroes is Sarah Blakely. And
Mm-hmm.
something that really stood out to me about her, as she not only was the first billionaire woman under the age of 40, I believe, if I remember that correctly, with her business. And her husband even, I think, has advocated this on social media many times, where she would not miss a day to pick up her daughter from school.
Yeah.
And so, like, I admired her ability to have a life outside of work, right? So that was something that was really important to me. And regardless if I have kids or not, I want to have a life outside of work.
Right.
And so how can I not just cultivate that for myself, but model that to other people, not just women, right? So that would be an exercise I would give to the viewers and listeners.
I love that. Yeah. There's a lot of people I always admire who have like really good boundaries between like work and home, where you can tell that like when you're with them, you're really present, and it's not like, on their phone or they're still dealing with something else. That's something I admire and like always try to put into action, because I know I like when I see that from others, which of course, always evolving, always learning, always working on. But I like that, pulling out what you like and what you kind of see in others and trying to emulate that. I was on a different meeting this morning, and, imitation is the biggest form of flattery. And it's kind of, what do you want your life to look like? What do you like from these people, and how do you want to implement that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. You have given a wealth of knowledge today, and great things to think about, both, if you're an executive woman just rising in the workforce, actually anybody out there. It's been great information. Is there anything else that you want to make sure shared that we didn't touch on?
I mean, I'll just reiterate, where we are, where it seems we are in the world, is there are more and more women coming into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's even more important for us women to ask ourselves, how can we stay true to us? Who are we, and how are we different? And going to bring many benefits and advantages to not just the workforce, but to humans, right? Like, to all humans, because of culturally, historically, how the society or culture norms trained us to be. How can we integrate that in more than just at home settings, in a way that can bring more good to the world?
I love that. And if anyone's, wondering how to kind of do this more in their own career and things like that, please reach out to Jenna, as she's happy to help. This is her focus. This is her specialty. And so her email's been going through the bottom down here, jenna@jennadillon.com. She's also one of our Purse Strings approved professionals, so you can check her out on our site, pursestrings.co. And I love the idea of an executive coach. I think we should all, have a coach somewhere in life to really help us grow. So thank you again for coming on, sharing your expertise, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I appreciate it. This has been enjoyable.
Yeah, we'll talk to everyone later. Bye.
All right. Bye.